and he's among those few Kenyans or Africans who've managed to surmount or to reach the summits of very many mountains. Wow. In his attempt to do so at the Everest, he wasn't able to come back down. Wow. That's a big headline on The Standard today.
And Daily Nation also make mention of the two stories, the Cheriot Kirui's story.
And the front pages of the Daily Nation and the Standard look more or less the same. The same choice of photo, same kind of headline, and Kirui on the side.
On the side, oh yes. Talk about Ruto strikes billions in the US. We'll be getting to that in a few. Also, a similar bit, Kenyan investors to partly fund 472 billion cash shillings US-backed Toldro, that is Business Daily.
And probably this is one of the biggest things that we can actually look forward to. Can you imagine an expressway to Mombasa from Nairobi?
Hey.
And this had been discussed a few years back. Finally, with the president's visit to the US, they finally agreed that the US will fund that road.
It is going to be a reality.
Yes, an image of the president there and his host at the White House. Minofu ya Amerika, kurasa wa mbele wa Taifa Leo, picha ile ile kama ile kwa kurasa wa mbele wa Business Daily. Rais Ruto pamoja na mwenyeji wake Rais Biden pale wakisema kuna minofu, na tuangalia minofu ni aina gani baadaye kikamilifu.
Kwenye gazeti la The Star, US visit, the billions America gave Ruto, and they have 3/4 of the front page focusing on that, just highlighting what the US will give Kenya, and also make mentioning of Cheriot Kirui.
Yes, and of course the president must be very happy that this is the news you're reading today. Unlike what...
And actually, by the way, the fact that since Monday until today is the only day that Deputy President Rigathi Gachagwa's
name not on the front
has
pages.
Not appeared on the front page.
And it's all good news from as in it's been a very successful visit for the president, if you look at the headlines in Kenya today. So it's a happy day for Kenyans and a happy day for the president. Kenya's price for Haiti mission, the big headline on the People Daily, and a very interesting photo of President William Ruto sitting on the US president's chair at the Oval Office with the US president standing behind him. And you know, I'm not so sure if I want to say what I'm about to say, but
okay,
it's the kind of thing if I visited the White House, I'd want to do, sit on the president's seat.
As you point about that, Kenyans on social media are saying Indio kutoka block.
Ameomoka.
Indio unasema umeomoka.
Yeah, ameomoka.
Kuna ile unakoga street yako, so umeomoka umeenda to another...
we have to wait and see. Okay, fine. Let's cross over to Uganda, and they're talking about other things. But even before we get to Uganda, I think one of the dailies in Tanzania, President Ruto's visit features on the front page of The Citizen. What Biden-Ruto meeting in US means for Africa. This is a daily in Tanzania.
Oh, yes.
And their biggest headline is about President Ruto's visit, because this visit, I think, will impact not just Kenya, but the region as well, and including the whole continent.
Oh, yes. Interestingly, now they had spoken to a couple of political analysts who voiced mixed views on what the meeting between US President Joe Biden and his Kenyan counterpart, Dr. William Ruto, mean for Africa. So there's a quote there by one of the analysts saying the meeting wasn't in the interest of the EAC, AU or Kenya. Rather, it intends to serve the best interest of the US as far as sustainable development is concerned. So the analysts who are viewing
mixed
it as...
reactions, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't really favor US as much, rather Kenya as much.
Kenya or East Africa.
But then it's US gets to favor more for this visit.
But then again, that's an analyst's opinion, and they're free to say what they want to say. Whether or not it is going to be in our favor, we wait to see. The headlines in Kenya are very positive this morning. Mbona anatuchomea upande hiyo? Tunangojea minofu, amesema kuna minofu. Mwananchi, maafa kiwandani. Habari ya maafa kule Tanzania. Sema mtambo wa joto wa Mtibwa Sugar ulivyoua wafanyakazi 11. Yumo aliyefanya kazi kwa miaka 35. Manusura wasimulia hali ilivyokuwa, kiwanda cha fungwa, chanzo cha ajali chatajwa, uchunguzi waanza. Na ni habari ya simanzi kule Tanzania. Joto, mtambo wa joto uliua wafanyakazi 11. Maafa kiwandani. Hizo ni habari zilizopewa kipaumbele kwenye ukurasa wa mbele wa Mwananchi kule Tanzania. Turejee, tuvuke boda tuende kwa
Uganda.
Yoweri Museveni. New Vision.
Museveni summons Chief Justice, IGP over land cases, Director of Public Prosecutions, as well as Lands Minister, also called. Wow. This even as the Parliament approves the new IGP. So I don't know if it is the same IGP who has been called, but then just on the same Meanwhile, Uganda gets FMD vaccines.
It is a big story. Uganda getting FMD vaccines in Kenya currently, and this is something that we've probably not focused on. There's actually a shortage of vaccines.
For children,
immunizations for children are not available. So yes, vaccines, I think next week will become part of the big stories on the front pages. Other stories in Uganda, fresh fight erupts over new budget allocations. That's a Daily Monitor. And even as we discuss the Finance Bill 2024 in Kenya, our neighbors in Uganda also talking about matters of budget processing.
Oh, yes. Well, let's get into other matters and take a look at tuanze na traffic leo ama weather.
Tunaweza angalia hali ya anga.
Hali ya anga, haya, tuanze na Nairobi. And yesterday, sijui sasa niseme my apologies ama ni hali ya hewa tu. That's why actually it's called a weather. Weather patterns. Yes.
Kulinyesha.
Weather.
It actually rained.
Oh, okay.
Yes, areas of Kiambu Road actually there was a serious downpour.
So si kudanganya sana.
Much later in the day at around 5, between 5 and 7 p.m. there was a major downpour, especially in Kiambu areas and along Kiambu Road.
Na niliwa warn.
Yes. Haukuwa off sana.
Yes. Let's take a look at how things are looking like. The weather knows it's a Friday, so this is how this is going to be looking like until the midday. Let me just zoom in for you. Right now it's about 16 degrees Celsius. It's about to be cloudy getting into the morning hours, 8 a.m., 9 a.m. hapo. But then when you get into the day, some sunny intervals until into the afternoon, where it promises to get rainy, some light showers as high as 60%. So India inaweza kuwa ile heavy downpour unasema between 6 p.m. there. Getting into
believe the young man. Believe the young man. He sometimes speaks some truth.
Oh yes. So this is one of those days that I urge you, if you're supposed to leave work today, starting your weekend, go home as early as possible for today. Make sure by 6 p.m. umefika kwa nyumba.
It's a Friday. Watu wanafanya kazi the whole week, unaambia ende nyumbani kufanya nini?
Home, whatever you like to call home. Home doesn't have to be home.
Okay.
It could be somewhere you feel home.
Okay.
You feel at home.
Okay.
Yes.
Granted.
Kama ni mahali unajifunika yes. That is how Nairobi is looking like as of today. Let's take a look at Mombasa. Yesterday was quite raining. Let's see how it is going to be looking like. 25 degrees Celsius is quite high.
A few minutes past 6, this is quite high.
Wow.
But
and
there's that storm that is affecting the weather pattern around the coastline.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, very high temperatures today.
29 degrees Celsius is the highest that watu wa Mombasa, watu pale pwani utakuwa napokea into the day, and chances of it raining for today is quite minimal. Leo kuna mvua.
That very high humidity.
Yes. Okay. Oh yeah, 90%. And finally, in Nakuru, let's refresh that. 16 degrees Celsius is in Tumezoea, but then
thunderstorms. Yes.
So before you get into thunderstorms, you'll be enjoying some sunny intervals into the midday, but then after that, some high average. That's above average rainfall. 90% is actually quite high, but then temperatures are 22 degrees Celsius there. That's in Nakuru there. Ambia Madhe. Relax kwa nyumba.
Right. And tomorrow is actually her birthday. So before we get there, happy birthday, Mom, in advance.
Leo.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mama Freddy. Happy birthday to you.
Hey.
Tuangalie masuala ya transport. In Nairobi, it's looking very much like a Friday. Barabara zote ni nywe. Lakini, if we could focus on this area, something here, a section that is red, Kawaida, Pangani section pale. Thika Road, before you get to Pangani, is smooth all the way from Ruiru, all the way Githurai, Kasarani. Similar to Kiambu Road. Kiambu Road is looking good as well. And even those coming from areas like Kitengela using Mombasa Road into town, it's looking good. Langata Road also looking good. Watu wajamka.
Kuna hii barabara inaitwa actually Thika Road as well as
everything is looking good today, including Wayakiwe all the way from Gitaru into town. I think let's take a look at Jogoo Road. Probably that's where we could find a bit of incidences, but nothing much, nothing out of the ordinary. Just Makadara there, a bit of a snarl up there, and probably there around City Stadium roundabout. After that, if you get into town, probably, yes, Landis Road and part of Haile Selassie Avenue, but hii ni kawaida. Matatus pale Marikiti, watu wanajaribu kufanya shughuli ile ya kawaida. But watu wajamka, it's Friday. Transport and traffic is looking good, but there's a build-up on Thika Road towards that Muthaiga interchange there at Muthaiga Square. So yes, you can see the red here. Just before you're getting, immediately after Mathare Hospital, that Utalii Drift, then you get a bit of red just before you get to the Pangani interchange. And that's the traffic situation in Nairobi this morning.
16 minutes past the top of the hour. You're saying looking good, and speaking of looking good, hey, our weekend queue anakaa, hey, looking good.
Naona, wacha tutamwona.
You know, just preparing your, you visually, kama viewer.
Okay.
Ujue, oh yes.
Geshamin Derito will be joining us for the news review in a short while and to prepare us for the country treat later on.
Oh yes.
Today in history?
Today in history, we can have the today in history before we, get into deeply into the papers.
Yes.
All right, we'll be having it a little bit later on. I think we can now cue the newspaper headlines so that we, skim through and take a look at what is inside there.
Okay, let's now take a look at in depth at the big headline, and of course it's what President Ruto managed to bag in his US state visit. And yes, on the front page of the Daily Nation, it is a big news, the biggest story there, and a photo of the president, the first lady, and their hosts, the porters and floaters there at the White House, at that balcony there. Bag of goodies. Ruto strikes billions in the US. President William Ruto and his host, US Biden, yesterday announced a raft of multi-billion shilling and new investment deals in Kenya with a focus on security, education, and governance. The stories extensively covered on pages 6 and 7, but on the front page, they just highlighted some of the deals. 471 billion shillings for the Nairobi-Mombasa Expressway, and I think to me this is the biggest highlight. If at all they can fix that, that will be a game changer for everyone. You can imagine an expressway from Nairobi to Mombasa, 475 kilometers toll road.
I mean, a game changer in even the time, a whole turnaround of the time that you'd get from Nairobi to Mombasa, even in goods.
Even for the region, even as analysts say that it may not be good for the region, but this, if it actually does happen, because that's another thing. If it actually does happen, it'll be a game changer even for the region.
And even opening up East Africa. But then, sasa hii ni ile unapigia mtu simu unamwambia nakuja.
Weka nyama.
Weka nyama nakuja from Nairobi.
Other highlights, 23 billion shillings from IDFC in affordable housing. 4.7 billion for basic and higher education. Yes, we need money for education. 917 million shillings. Kenya-US partnership to strengthen and modernize the National Police Service. Now, this is part of the deals for linked to the Haiti mission. And non-NATO ally, this is something else. President Biden was set to designate Kenya as a major non-NATO, that's a North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally. That is a front page of the Daily Nation today. Other stories on the front page, this is how you will benefit under the new health plan. And of course, the story about, this very sad story about this mountain climber, mountaineer Cheruiyot Kirui, who set off to climb Mount Everest without supplemental oxygen in April. He was well aware of the risks he was taking and was confident that he would make it, but this was not to be. That's the front page of this, the Daily Nation. And of course, that health story is what features on the back page. You can get to read it and understand more about the Social Health Authority revealing the benefits to be covered in the new Social Health Insurance Fund. That's the Daily Nation.
All right. Let me take a look at Business Daily. We also have the Standard on the e-paper, but then I can first take a look at the Business Daily. They say Kenyan investors to partly fund 472 billion cash shillings US-backed toll road. As you say, this is one of one of the biggest highlights for this particular visit. And just a brief, they say local private investors will be given a chance to participate in the financing of the 3.6 billion US dollars, which translates to 472.9 billion Kenyan shillings, expressway from Mombasa to Nairobi, after the Kenya National Highway Authority, KENHA, and US-based private equity Everstrong Capital LLC signed a deal to start the construction of the toll road. This again is a whole story of US ensuring that Kenya isn't really looking at the east when it comes to even construction of roads, because over years Kenya has been looking, to the east for such kind of projects. So this is going to be interesting, even the timelines, comparing how the east does it and now how the US is going to do it.
Yes, it will be interesting to see what kind of construction mechanism the US will employ.
Yes.
We're used to Chinese expertise.
Yes.
Yes.
Other stories focused on the front page of Business Daily, on the ticker, the right scroll. Matters economy, extensive on page 4. They say manufacturers push for cheaper night power benefiting factories. Still on Matters economy, a new pay platform for Kenyan workers in Saudi Arabia. So listen to this. Newly recruited domestic workers, including Kenyans in Saudi Arabia, will from July get salaries through registered banks and digital channels, and reforms aimed at ensuring employees are paid on time and as per terms in their employment contracts. I feel like that's quite some good news. It really sounds like some good news.
All right.
Because, a number of Kenyans have been pushing, even for the employers. They have months of delayed salaries. So this is really going to be a game changer as well. In Matters companies on the right scroll, Safaricom Ethiopia eyes new 46 billion cash shillings loan from IFC. That in a nutshell is the Business Daily.
On the Standard, and if at all you're looking at the dailies side by side, you'd be forgiven to confuse the Standard and the Daily Nation today.
For real.
Because even the alignment of the stories, the choice of images and everything looks more or less the same. And what we have that's on the front page, that I think is a Daily Nation. The Standard looks more or less the same. Ruto bags 1 trillion shilling deals as US 6 influence. From the 447 billion highway connecting Mombasa to Nairobi, to 900 million for prisons reforms, the president not only strutted on the red carpet, but he also bagged deals that could transform or reform institutions and spur the economy. And then that choice of photo there from that balcony. And yes, everyone is picking the 477 billion shilling deal for the expressway between Nairobi and Mombasa. That's the front page. There's also a deal for military, and I think there are choppers there available. 198 million shillings worth of chopper donations to Kenya. And then the story, that sad story of a Kenyan dying climbing Mount Everest, also features at the exact same corner as it does on the front page of the Daily Nation.
So, okay, for the 198 will be used to support the country's electoral reforms.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, it is the 16 choppers.
16, yes, 16. Kenya to receive 8 Hueys and the 8 MD-500 helicopters to bolster regional peace and security.
All right. That's the front page of the Standard today.
Let's take a look at another daily. We can take a look at People Daily. That photo, I love the fact that People Daily wasn't swayed by either dailies to go with the balcony photo.
I wonder.
It chose that one.
I wonder
on,
when other presidents come to visit Kenya. Do they ask to sit on the president's chair? We have President William Ruto there sitting on President Joe Biden's seat at the Oval Office in the White House.
Particularly, he's smiling ear to ear.
I know. You would be that excited. Believe you me, you would be that excited. We've seen the Oval Office in so many movies.
Oh, yes.
But for you to actually get to sit
the real
one on the real president's seat,
yes,
and feel the heat from there, wow, quite something. And you can see how happy President William Ruto and his host are. They really had a good time together, I think.
Ile unapiga simu hapo, direct line to State House. Unaambia your second, can you see me?
Hapa kuna ile button ya kufinya nuclear warheads inaamka. Scroll down a bit on the front page of the People Daily.
On to the very top.
Yes.
Scroll, just taking a look at the Biden goodies for Ruto. Actually, quite a number of them there. People Daily has listed. So first one, and also an interesting one when it comes to even matters military as well. So Kenya actually becomes the 19th country to be designated the non-NATO ally in sub-Saharan Africa, or rather, well, generally in Kenya. So I think in Africa it's only it's Egypt, and I've forgotten the other countries, but Egypt is one of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, Kenya is the only.
Kenya is the only, but
it's the first non-NATO ally now.
Yes. So that actually means, even for someone who's wondering, what does this mean? This means that Kenya is going to now get opportunities to have the weaponry, even from the US. So it's going to be a huge deal for Kenya.
You're a NATO ally?
Yes.
Okay.
This means, again, even its stand on Russia and its matters.
Now,
it's going to be
I
very
think
tricky.
this is one thing that we'll really need to look at and analyze properly.
Deeply.
What does it mean to be given that kind of status, a non-NATO ally by the US, and being the only country with that designation in sub-Saharan Africa? What does it mean to our neighbors and the region? Probably the reason why some people are uncomfortable with this visit.
Even when we take a look at Uganda, I mean, Uganda has made its voice when it comes to Russia and all, and it's even, its relationship with them. So it's going to be an interesting one to take a look at, an analysis on the same. That's just a couple of the Biden goodies for Ruto. Could you take a look at a couple of them? Or rather, because I know the Star is also focused on on some of them.
All right, let's take a look at the Star. Where is the Star? Oh yes, US, on the Star. US visit the billions America gave Ruto.
Yes.
16 US manufactured helicopters. That's a big one there. 150 armored security vehicles. Wow. I think, and as far as military concerned, 150 armored security vehicles, that's a big deal.
Oh, yes.
The choppers, the kind of challenges we've been having with military choppers, mostly from the US. Also, questions will be asked about that. Other issues to do with fighting corruption, anti-malaria campaigns, and counter-terrorism measures listed there on the front page of the Standard. All right.
Seemingly, the
quite a bag of
security,
goodies. Yes.
Investment in security has a huge chunk when it comes to all this.
Quite some bag of goodies there that the president is coming back with. Let's take a look at the cartoons now. And I was trying to see if I can get the cartoon on the Standard, but on the Daily Nation.
I'll help you. I have it here on the.
Okay, on the Daily Nation, page 18. They talk about matters of Finance Bill 2024, and someone is trying to squeeze the huge book that is the Finance Bill 2024 through the door into the House Finance Committee, while someone else is dashing out, and this is a caricature of the Senator for Busia, Okia Omtata, and he's going towards the courts and he's saying, let's do this again. He's known to challenge a lot of things in the corridors of justice. So yes, that's the status of that discussion. You found the cartoon on the on the Standard?
On the Standard, I have it here. It has to do with the jet. And they say a juxtaposition of the first one, that a very expensive jet, they call it the Hustler jet. And just below it, a common mwananchi pulling a mkokoteni, they say the Hustler's set. And the common mwananchi is just actually pulling bags of taxes. Oh, yes.
The Hustler jet vis-a-vis the Hustler's set. That's a cartoon on the Standard. Finally, the cartoon on the People Daily, do we have it?
On the People Daily, let me help you open it.
Page 10.
Page 10, tuone leo stano, they have it. State of the taxpayer. Ile kitu ya kupima kilo.
Ya nyama.
Ile ya nyama ile unapima but it's been long since I ever saw.
They got a different weighing scales.
Yes.
This is the old type of weighing scale.
Yes, and it has been quite heavy. They say it's about like a 1 kg, and imefinyilia Mkenya. But the common mwananchi is still holding on, and with that placard, State of the Taxpayer. All, okay, People Daily as well as standards are going the whole theme of the state visit, and how much it is really affecting the state, the taxpayer. Those are the cartoons this morning, and just a reminder of State of the Nation coming up, the youth perspective, analyzing what, even for the young people, what does this really mean for them?
All right. So Ken Babu, Edwin Kigoli, and Eric Mungai will be joining us for that conversation. Do stand by for that. Now we want to bring you some of the highlights from the U.S. President's state visit. And Kenya and the U.S. made new partnerships on technology, security, and debt relief. After the official reception on the South Lawn, Ruto, his host, U.S. President Joe Biden, performed the famous walk on the colonnade, the stretch from the main White House building ending up in the Oval Office. The two later held a meeting before proceeding for bilateral talks. Ruto arrived in the United States on Monday and visited Atlanta, then spoke with business executives in the White House on Wednesday. On Friday, he will discuss digital inclusion in Africa with Vice President Kamala Harris at an event hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce.
Build firmly on the foundation of shared values which we cherish, of freedom, democracy, the rule of law, respect for human rights. And we are very proud of the relationship that we have built. And that relationship, Mr. President, has given us the opportunity to face our challenges together. And you, Mr. President, and the United States have provided leadership, and Kenya is working with you in the context of the challenges that face our region, challenges of security, challenges of peace. And together, we have surmounted many challenges, and we have the wherewithal and the capacity to do more together. And Mr. President, we will be exploring opportunities for trade, for investment, working together in the frameworks that exist, whether it is on climate. You remember, Mr. President, we had the Africa Climate Summit that I convened in Nairobi, and we changed the narrative on the African continent. Instead of us thinking about victimhood, we decided that we're going to provide solutions, working with progressive democracies like the US on how to deal with these challenges. And last 3 weeks, I also convened the International Development Association IDA Replenishment Summit in Nairobi with the World Bank, again to look at solutions around the international financial architecture. How do we make it much more sensitive, agile, and that can respond to pressing economic issues that have been compounded by climate change and inflation and interest rates. And I'm very proud, Mr. President, that the United States is working us towards resolving the challenges that face us, but also exploring opportunities for trade, for investment in areas of technology. And we will be signing one of the most progressive agreements on tech between Microsoft and a Kenyan company, looking into the future around new technologies, AI. And so, Mr. President, I am inspired that these moments are giving us the opportunity to leverage on our friendship and to build a stronger collaboration to face up to the challenges that face the globe, to make our countries freer, safer, healthier, and much more progressive. And I'm looking forward.
Lot to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you all very much.
President William Ruto, First Lady Rachel Ruto, and their daughters led hundreds of guests in attending the state dinner hosted by U.S. President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. Ruto and the First Lady were received on the north portico of the White House by their hosts, Joe and Jill Biden. Dressed in a full tuxedo, the president would later perform a walk on the grand staircase. Former President Barack Obama had earlier on attended a reception in the Blue Room prior to the state dinner and stopped into the dinner area briefly. Obama, whose father was born in Kenya, visited the country as president in 2015 and returned in 2018 after leaving office. Biden said that the United States has a strong respect for Kenya and recalled when former President Jimmy Carter hosted Kenyan leaders for the first time. Now, the White House rolled out red carpets and an elaborate state dinner on Wednesday night in honor of President William Ruto and First Lady Rachel Ruto. Former U.S. President Barack Obama, former President Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and actor LeVar Burton were among the distinguished guests who attended the official state dinner. At the state dinner, Biden made a toast to the Republic of Kenya. Ruto, on the other hand, expressed his appreciation for the state visit and made a toast to the health and long life of President Biden. Now, this is the first time that the U.S. is holding a state visit for an African head of state in 16 years. The dinner saw a mix of cuisines from both Kenya and the U.S. prepared by decorated chefs at the White House. Now, a state visit is among the highest diplomatic tools and honors that the White House can employ to honor a top ally, with a meticulously planned event arriving as Biden seeks to emphasize a strong alliance between the two countries.
There's a bright light in the White House tonight with our guests who have been impressive and accommodating. And you know, Jill and I are honored to have you here and representing, including many members of the African diaspora. One just left, Barack. You've been very gracious. You met the president this morning. was just here a little while ago. And what I'd like to do, President Ruto, we share a strong respect for the history that connects us together. You know, as you know, President Carter was the first president to host leaders of Kenya at an official breakfast, dinner. And in his own dinner toast, he said, your counterpart said that he called the two nations neighbors, and like neighbors, I got to get his quote exactly right, and like neighbors, he said,
the hospitality of the American people have been exceptional. The openness, goodwill, authenticity, and generosity of the American people greatly enhances our appreciation of your achievements. And in keeping this nation as a thriving global powerhouse, and it magnifies our experience of the beauty and the greatness of this land. We are proud of the robust social, economic, security to shoulder for democracy in a world where troubles have shaken the faith of many. For security as the engine for freedom and as guarantor for all aspirations of trust, enterprise, and innovation, and for prosperity as the ultimate good that our nations and our people so richly deserve. I am encouraged by our achievements over the past 60 years, which it is safe to dream, to work, and to prosper. Partnership and solidarity between Kenya and the United States. To the President.
Some of the interesting pictures coming to us from the U.S. state visit by President William Ruto to the White House yesterday, the state dinner, and some of the engagements in the White House. Quite interesting photos there. Now, let's take a look at some of these and how Kenyans are interpreting what we're seeing. And with me in studio this morning, we're privileged to have Ken Babu, Youth League Chairperson, Democratic Action Party Kenya, that's DAP Kenya.
Yes.
Karibu sana, it's a pleasure having you in studio.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Yes, karibu sana. And political analyst Eric Mugai joining us for this discussion as well.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
It's good to have
been
you
long since
I've
joined the viewers on TV 47. And you know, Fred, we are in the US. You know, back then when we had something they used to call house Negroes, they always spoke in we.
We.
Yes, if the master is sick, they said, you know, we are sick.
We are
master,
sick.
We are sick. So we are also in the US, even though we are here on TV 47, enjoying the largesse of the US taxpayers. But good morning to our viewers.
Okay. And as we say we, I think all the dailies are in agreement with you. If you look at all the major dailies in Kenya, they're talking about this. On the Daily Nation, they talk about Ruto striking billions in the US. The Standard goes with Ruto bags 1 trillion shilling deals as US seeks influence. The Star rather, US visit the billions America gave Ruto. Taifa Leo ni nofu ya Amerika. Hizi ni habari kuu ambazo ziko kwenye kurasa za mbele leo. And on the People Daily, Kenya's price for hate emission. Now, the big discussion throughout has been, what are we getting out of this? And that has been the question throughout this week, concerns about, or probably we're spending too much money, taking the president there on a state visit that probably will not result in much. But looking at the front pages, if I could just pick one highlight, that deal for the Nairobi-Mombasa Expressway, 475 kilometers, which has been a long time coming. This deal was discussed quite a few years back. It has never come to fruition. But now 471 billion shilling deal being signed there between the two countries. Now, these are the goodies that people have been talking about. Ken, are you satisfied that probably this is a kind of expectation that Kenyans had? And if at all we actually get this as promised, then it would be worthwhile.
Thank you so much, Bonafred. First, I want to say that as a Kenyan and a patriotic citizen, I'm so much proud of myself to be associated with this country as it stands right now. And like you mentioned earlier on, we are in the US. Indeed, we are. And if you look at...
you are the White House.
We are the White House. And if you look at the goodies that are coming up with as a result of this visit, I think we can say that it's a good step. But again, we must also put into question the aspect of implementation. Because indeed, if these monies come, are we going to put them into exact use that they're supposed to be put into? That's now the discussion we should be having right now, because the president is there and he has managed to secure these deals. And from what he communicated and the discussions that are around, it is true that these goodies will come. But as a country, we have to sit down and have a meeting and ask ourselves.
Tujiweke mkutano hapo nyuma ya tent.
Tujiweke nyuma ya tent na tujiulize, hii pesa ikikuja jamani, itawekwa pale ambapo inafaa ikuwe. Because we've always had an issue with the implementation. Sasa hiyo let's cure that as a house, so that ile pesa ikikuja pale tuiweke in the right place that it should be, so that the country and the people can benefit from the deals that the president have sealed.
Eric, what's your take on this?
Well, I say it's a good start. We are off to a good start. Remember, Kenya and the US have enjoyed good relationships, a good relationship for the last couple of years. I see some of the deals that were signed. They are not necessarily new deals. I would imagine it's a commitment to work towards them. For instance, when you look at the Kenya shillings 471 billion approximately for the Nairobi-Mombasa Expressway, this has been a deal that's been long coming. You remember at one point it had been given to an American company called Bechtel. Then at some point there were rumors that it was going to the South Koreans. So it's not a new project, so to speak. And I think part of there's a big difference in how US works and how Chinese work. Because you remember when Obama was president, they came up with something they used to call OPIC, that is the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. And when you look at the track record of that entity, it was meant to bolster trade between the US and African countries. But by the time they were winding it up, it hadn't actually deployed a single cent to the African regimes, so to speak. And so, and you know, because you know the US has some level of bureaucracy, especially in deploying these particular funds that we might have signed. So I think it's a good start. It's a good start in the fact that we are in agreement that this is what we need to do. But I think the devil is in the details as to how actually we implement these things for the benefit of Kenyans. You know, look at something like the affordable housing. You know, the International Development Finance Corporation, which was formerly known as the OPIC, has injected, or rather will inject 23.5 billion. I mean, this is part of, the government wanted to raise this per year. So if IDFC give us this money, it will be a good start. We could start with Kibera and the likes and see how that goes. But as I said, the devil is in the detail. It's a good start that we agree this is the way we need to move. And also geopolitically, we must ask ourselves, becoming a non-NATO ally, what does it mean for our geopolitics? Especially in the view that, you know, we have Chinese who have set up in Djibouti. So let's see. I mean, it's a good thing we have started, but let's unpack what exactly that means for Kenya, especially in the context of East Africa and the context of the African Union.
And speaking about East Africa, it is interesting that I look at one of the dailies in Tanzania, which has this story about Ruto's visit to the US as the main story. If my director could help me with the front page of The Citizen. The Citizen in Tanzania talks about what Biden-Ruto meeting in US means for Africa, meaning that everyone is watching Kenya and watching President Ruto and the move he's making. And they're saying political analysts have voiced mixed views on what the meeting between the two leaders means for Africa. And the meeting, according to one of the analysts, he says the meeting wasn't in the interest of the EAC, AU, or Kenya. Rather, it intends to serve the best interests of the US as far as sustainable development is concerned. There are still concerns, Ken, that it is simply the US trying to assert its influence on an African country. That these goodies may look good on paper, but definitely it comes with a lot of other things that the US is simply using this as a foot towards greater influence in the region.
You know, Fred, just like you mentioned, you know, there's an aspect of geopolitics and the policy of the world that is taking center stage. In as much as it's not coming out clean, but whatever the journalist said might there's some elements of truth in it. In as much as the president visited the US and the reception was all good and everything, and the goodies are now coming, it is true that the US might be, or is somehow trying to assert themselves in the entire region through Kenya. Because looking at in the African politics on the issues of AU and everything, we've seen many African heads of states are somehow giving Kenya some soft spots and everything. And now the president moving to the US and all that we've seen, it is true, it can be true that the US is trying to stabilize themselves, because you've seen the northern side and the eastern side of the world as well are also getting interested in the African states, and you've seen the coup and everything that is happening in the other side of the African countries. So to some extent, the US might also try to come in and ensure that their positions are not interfered with, so that in the event that maybe a coup or something is happening, they stamp the authority to ensure that no matter what's happening, their stamp is there. Mm-hmm. And they have something to control, and they have enough numbers in Africa as compared to their opponents.
And it sounds more or less, Eric, like a scramble for Africa all over again. Yeah. We've seen what Russia is doing in the western part of Africa, and the attempts to exit or force out the French influence in that area. China and the Chinese inroads it has made. Currently we are talking about new funding for the extension of the SGR into Uganda. Mm-hmm. And so everyone is trying to get a slice or a piece of this continent. And probably the US has gotten it right with its choice to go with Kenya.
I agree with you that it's the 21st century scramble for Africa. But the main question is, what does Africa, and so to speak Kenya, get to benefit from the scramble itself? Because remember, in the first scramble, it was a scramble for resources. Mm-hmm. And Africa got a raw deal in the fact that we only exported raw material, which to some extent we still do even up to date. And looking at this contextually from geopolitics, you know, US is up against BRICS. And BRICS is made up of, you know, some of the emerging economies. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the structure of trade, you can tell that the Kenyan President William Ruto is more inclined towards the West. And the question I would ask myself is, if I were in his shoes and if I was in the diplomat's shoes, is how can we milk the relationship to the benefit of ordinary Kenyans, now that, not because the US loves us, mm-hmm. but now because there is another competitor in the name of BRICS. So what does the US have to offer for us as Kenyans, Because now you have an upper negotiation hand, not because the US likes you, because remember, US has said, for them it's not about friendship, it's about interests. Okay. Now the question is, how do we cater to their interests, knowing very well they have a competitor in the name of BRICS? Then how do we harness that fear? Because it's like the fear of the Cold War. Depending on which side you took, there were goodies based on which side you picked. And therefore, I would want to say that Kenya and Africa at large has an opportunity to harness the relationship it stands to build with its Western or Eastern allies. But having said that, one of my expectations in the new scramble, so to speak, if you look at the most developed countries, all of them have an Exim Bank. And what Exim banks do, they facilitate export of materials from their countries towards mostly Africa or China or wherever. And part of my expectation in this deal, because I could see all the economic advisors went there, was that we would have gotten resources to bolster one of our government banks, so to speak, to turn it into an Exim bank, so that we facilitate our traders to not just be importing, but specifically to export to other markets. For instance, AGOA will be revised very soon. But one of the challenges with AGOA is that even though the opportunity exists, many Kenyan entrepreneurs do not have the resources to, one, set up the infrastructure to make garments and what have you, and secondly, also to export.
So some of these opportunities could be lost to many.
Yeah, even though they exist, they could be lost. So part of what I expected in this delegation was that we would have secured funds. For instance, we have Development Bank of Kenya, which to more or less is a moribund institution. I would have expected that part of what we would have negotiated is we turn it into an Exim bank, so that if Fred wants now to manufacture for export, we support him from the word go. And then we task our ambassadors wherever they are to get market for us, because you already have financing to be able to export. But when you look at much of what we got is actually importation. When you look at, we got, say, 16 helicopters. They are good, but last time when we were here, we were discussing one of the American helicopters.
We're actually getting eight more of such.
So you can tell that yes, we have gotten good opportunities, but I would have preferred to have also struck, we signed agreements that bolster our balance of payment, especially in terms of export.
Okay.
And then Fred, just to chip in into what my brother Eric is saying, it is true that everything that we've secured here are imports, but again, we've not seen issues or matters around agriculture being discussed in this whole discussion. But Kenya, we are the backbone of Africa in terms of agriculture, if so to say. We've not seen issues of tea, coffee, look at that, being discussed on this the whole trip. So where do we put all this? Because as much as agriculture is concerned, other part of the issues or part of the discussion that I think the president ought to have brought on board is how do we transact business in terms of exchange and exportation of our agricultural products, tea, coffee. We're having a lot of farmers, many farmers in the central and in the western part of this country who are producing heavily. So where do we put them?
Okay.
Okay.
Talking about excitement and the kind of influence that this country or this kind of okay, I think time for us to take a break. We'll come back and take a look at that kind of excitement we see with this big brother, small brother kind of relationship. You're watching Morning Cafe. We'll continue looking at the U.S. State visit by President William Ruto that ends today. Welcome back. Now, President William Ruto has maintained that the world cannot afford to resign to fate over the deadly climate crisis. According to Ruto, the world must get back to work, take a bold, unusual and path-breaking resolve to safeguard our ecosystem. While calling on more climate financing, the head of state further reiterated that the world can only keep communities safe and healthier through the healing of the planet. He was speaking when he delivered his speech on investing in climate solutions at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg Center in Washington after the official arrival at the White House.
It is a great pleasure to be here today to discuss a topic of immense importance to all of us. Over the past 2 years, I have hosted and participated in numerous international events to highlight Africa's challenges and the tremendous opportunities we can offer while calling for concerted national, regional, and global action to all life on Earth. And I speak this authoritatively as a scientist myself, is now very well established. In 2023, for example, we broke many records we do not wish to, nor can we afford to break again. The hottest year on record was 2023. The wettest in some regions, the driest in others. The first 4 months of this year have also registered record warmth, with each month being the hottest on record. In Africa, climate change is central to our development challenges. Kenya, as you've heard from my sister Samantha, is currently experiencing one of the worst floods on record, following years of devastating drought. Our hearts go out to Brazil, Afghanistan, and other parts of the world experiencing similar hardships. Extreme weather events affect the United States as well. I was watching CNN and I could see. And as these events become increasingly uninsurable, they undermine people's livelihoods and, of course, financial security. Climate change impacts have affected the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of people, occasioning losses in GDP of anywhere between 5% and 15% annually in our continent. The rising costs of adaptation are diverting funds from essential services like health, education, social services, potentially destabilizing our continent and the globe in general. Against this background, and this backdrop of urgent interconnectedness of issues of climate change, development, and stability, trust in international cooperation is diminishing. Democracy is under pressure. Complex global problems are often oversimplified by setting people against one another and by retreating into isolationism and deglobalization.
Yes, Kenya's President William Ruto speaking there at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg Center in Washington, D.C., as he made his address on the climate solutions. I'm still in studio with Ken Babu, Youth League Chairperson, Democratic Action Party Kenya, DAPK, and political analyst Eric Mungai. Just before the break, we wanted to examine the kind of excitement we see among Kenyan leaders and even Kenyans in watching this. And there's a very interesting photo on the front page of the People Daily, if my director could help me with that. Yes, of President William Ruto, a greeting President William Ruto there and his host, Joe Biden. This is inside the Oval Office. And we see President Ruto sitting in the seat, in the US president's seat. And many people wonder, this is the kind of thing you would do when you get to State House and ask on that seat. Do other presidents coming to Kenya ask to sit on President Ruto's seat? This is the kind of excitement we see. And the balance of power, if you look at the kind of influence the US would have on Kenya, this is definitely a big brother, small brother kind of relationship. Probably the State House would not want such images on the front pages of the dailies. They would have preferred what's on the front page of the Daily Nation or the Standard. What do you think, Ken?
Yeah.
As far as influence is concerned?
We are human beings. We are all human. And Fred, given an opportunity, even in your county,
I would definitely, admittedly, I would be excited to
at the county level, you'll speedily sit on the governor's seat and take numerous photos. In fact, you'll be the one to post them. So I think the president is just happy. Like any other person in Kenya, we're happy. And that is something that is expected. I don't think it's something big. But being at the State House and there's a state visit, and these are the White House and state visit, Oval Office, and then the big brother offers you an opportunity to sit on the seat, you definitely do it.
He was there for bilateral talks, which by all standards would mean some sort of balance. But when you see such a picture, balance?
When we used to study communication, we studied that there is verbal communication and there is non-verbal communication.
Yes.
And we studied that 80% of how we communicate is non-verbal. We only verbalize 20%. And when you look at the body language, especially on the front page of the People Daily, you can tell the level of excitement. In fact, if you have been following social media, you could tell that the delegation that went to the US, first and foremost, were very happy to be in the US itself, leave alone even the bilateral discussions.
There's general excitement of just being in the US.
Just getting that visa, stamped and going on behalf of the Kenyan state in itself was something to be excited about. And getting to now the White House itself, I have seen many bloggers, going around White House, and so it was how do we call it when you're really excited? Ode, it was a hallowed moment for many of the people in that delegation. What I was asking myself from a communication perspective is if say Putin had visited the US, would Biden have allowed Putin to sit and him to stand? Because remember, as much as US is a state, is a powerful state, William Ruto is our president. He does not represent himself. He represents me as Mungai, whether I am a farmer, whether I am a businessman. He is there to represent me, and by extension, 50 million Kenyans. And so he's there as an equal. He's not there because US is sympathizing with him for him to be there. So I think in terms of the balance of power, even though we agree that US is a powerful state, but at the same time we must, because when Ruto came into power, he made a very powerful speech, if you recall. And he said one of the things he will not do is go to places where there are 50 presidents and they always have to step on the podium to get a photo, and what they go back home to, where they go home back with is just photos. The one of the powerful presidents, say Putin or Biden, stands there, and what changes is the African presidents. Yes. So unaona unamaliza unaambiwa wewe kuja. Wewe unatolewa alafu unaambiwa wewe kuja pia wewe, But I guess the world of international politics, you can speak all you want to speak. But I think in terms of protocol, even though the excitement was there, I think that picture is misplaced. It is not what the government is. So we know we are in the US. That's what I said. It's not what we would have liked.
This picture has the potential of being used against President Ruto.
Especially by other African presidents. Remember for me, President Ruto does not care what I think about him. Really, he doesn't care. But for him, he cares about what Suluhu thinks about him. He cares about what Museveni thinks about him. And so what I'm imagining is when Museveni is looking at that photo, what does he think,
It's one of those interesting photos. I've seen what the Daily Nation and the Standard have gone with, and it's a photo of the two presidents and the first ladies at a balcony. A lot of balance on that picture. But this one, especially the one on the People Daily,
I think
the choice by the editor to go with that photo says a lot.
I think the People Daily hit us below the belt. They should have put that as inset or somewhere.
It's not the kind of photo you want to see on the front page of a daily.
You know, it's not, I mean, the fact that they put it there does not mean that because it exists. But I mean, for prominence, you know, these are people that will circulate across the whole nation. And when my grandmother is seeing the president, she woke up to vote at 4 a.m., being treated like that is not a very good feeling.
And what we've seen back home, now this is in the White House, what we've seen back home here, and many people have actually raised this online, Ken, is the influence the U.S. ambassador, the current U.S. ambassador, Meg Whitman, appears to have on this administration. We saw even an image of the President William Ruto holding an umbrella for the ambassador as she walks in the middle of the red carpet with President Ruto on the side. Many people interpreted that to mean that she's the one with more authority. This is a U.S. ambassador to Kenya, not a president. This is not the equivalent of Joe Biden. But that is a kind of influence we're talking about, that in all our interactions between Kenya and the U.S., they would appear to be more influential, the big brother who is just talking down at us. Okay.
You know what you're saying, the picture you're talking about, I think I saw something like that. And like you just mentioned, communication is very key. And in all aspect and everything that has happened since the president went to the US, there has been many communications that has come through. So most of it is non-verbal. And just as you've said, the president working with the ambassador and the president holding on to the umbrella as ambassador passes through. That's only before before even Joe Biden comes into place. That only tells you how much influence the US have over us, has over. And then that tells you to what extent can we make independent decisions when the US is involved in the discussion. And then that tells you also that in the discussions that are happening even today in the US, most of it, we are just participating in that discussion. We are not making so much influence. We are not even making so much contributions. We're just there to say, okay, we are there to stamp that this was discussed in our presence. But we are not putting in we are not adding in our input or maybe deleting something. No, we are not doing much. So the US has always tried to appear that they are the big brothers and they are the most influential, right from home. And now it is in their land. And then, you know, at that point, like you said, from our political leaders who are there, the delegation that the president went with, the guys are so excited. In fact, they are overexcited. When the president was addressing the Black Caucus, I saw the leader of minority and majority. You cannot imagine that those are the people that when we see around here, we tremble. Those guys were like any other youth leader in the US. I mean, you could not imagine that.
Excitement.
And then when the big guy, the Goliath guy,
Shaquille O'Neal,
showed up, and everybody wanted to take a photo with him. You know, guy, we are in the US, and these guys, we have such guys here.
But again, it is the choice of photos, and probably let's come and try and examine the role of Kenyan media. And that image that you've just talked about, the image of the Kenyan president taking a photo with the NBA superstar, Shaquille O'Neal, was on all the front pages.
Exactly.
Is that the kind of image you want to see your president in?
And just Fred, before Eric comes in, that image communicated a lot. If you looked at how the president, even the posture, the body language, everything, it was like, my guy. It was the NBA guy now pulling on the president like, my bro. You get that? And that's a head of the state.
Are we seeing a series of instances where probably our head of state, our commander-in-chief, has been portrayed in a situation that does not appear necessarily presidential? And are we seeing that in this, mainly in the interactions with the U.S. ambassador and the U.S. president or any other person he has had to engage in? And I'm saying this because even when he went to the Tyler Perry Center Tyler Perry Studios. Tyler Perry himself was not available to welcome him. This many people interpreting to say, wanakuchukulia aje hawa watu.
If you, one, let me say this, that TV47 has been very consistent in the way they have covered the US trip. In fact, I think it is the only media station that has tried to give a balanced, view of the trip to the US, because I've been following across the other stations, and I think you've done an exemplary job.
Well, George Maringa is doing a good job.
Yes, and I'm not saying this because I'm in your
we know it's
I'm in your pressings.
You are signing yourself safe.
Let me say this. One, I think the government itself, in terms of communication, goofed. So what happened is that they hyped the trip. Kenyans were really invested in the trip. But when they all left, because it appears the whole communication team left to go with the president, then there was no one to take care of what was supposed to be communicated to the Kenyan citizenry. So it became a take-all. Anyone could take anything, distribute anywhere. Any journalist could say, and when I say any journalist, I do not mean that the media should be gagged in terms of what they should report. But remember, we have a duty to protect our institutions. So when the president is out there, as I said, he represents me, he represents you, and it doesn't matter whether you voted for him or not. If the West views him as a strong president, they respect me as a Kenyan for being strong. If they view him as a weak president, then whenever I go to those states, then they view me as you say you're from Kenya, and then they have something to say about Kenya based on what was portrayed. And therefore, I think next time, if there is a next state visit, I think government needs to plan accordingly and effectively in terms of, one, how the president is portrayed to the Kenyan public, and secondly, what do they want the media to report while they are there? Because remember, media could take different angles. When you see the People Daily putting that kind of a photo, it is mainstream. You see, when it is on social media, anyone can dismiss it. Photoshop, but when it is mainstreamed, then we get a different view of government. So I think next time, maybe when we go to Russia, or to Japan, because I do not think we'll be having another state visit in the next 5 years. We can only now go to China or Russia or some of those big states. I think government communication machinery needs to up their game.
You feel this photo should not have been on the front page?
It should not have been on the front page of the People Daily, but we are a democratic, as the president said in the US, we uphold the tenets of democracy, which includes the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. But as a president, if I were president, that is not a photo I want to see. That is when the American president is standing behind your seat and they are holding your seat on the chair, and you see, as the Kenyan president, your green is, you can see his green. He's smiling ear to ear. So it looks playful. Actually, when you look at it, it looks playful. Now, that does not communicate power. I would have expected that, the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you sit,
and we've seen a lot of that.
At what point you smile. Yes. You see, all these things are usually orchestrated to convey power. Even when you communicate friendship, there is a body language that you want to adapt to communicate friendship. But I think the way the camaraderie between the Kenyan president and the ambassador, in my opinion, is not very presidential. And I think when he comes back, he needs to be guarded, because this is an ambassador. It's just like the ambassadors that we have sent to DRC or to Uganda or to which. If I see Museveni, for instance, playing around with the ambassador of Kenya to Uganda, and even when you think about it in your head, you can already tell it's not possible for the Ugandan president, so to speak, just for example, to have a playful relationship with you would expect it to be formal. You would expect things to be dictated. After here, we do this. After here, we do this.
We expect our head of state to remain as a focal point.
Yes, as a focal point.
Fred and Eric, let me ask you a question. If you had a meeting today, and maybe you had maybe 5 members of parliament and a governor, maybe, for instance, and it's a photo session, maybe you want to take a photo, and there are 2 seats, who is going to sit? Who is going to sit? If we had maybe 2 MPs here and a governor, for instance.
No, the highest position, the one with the highest position.
Or do away with the seats and let them all stand.
Yes.
Because the question we're saying is that we've seen a lot of images from there, and these are beautiful images of Kenya's president relating to his host in a very presidential manner. And this is what we are expecting to be communicated back home, that he's there to represent this country, bilateral discussions, this a meeting of, okay, fine, we know, we understand, we cannot say Kenya and the US are on the same level, but at least it's a meeting of equals. These are heads of states, commanders-in-chief of their respective countries, and we expect some level of balance. So when local media reports something that does not bear the same level of balance, that is a question. And we therefore question ourselves, are we as Kenyan media doing a disservice to the office of the presidency?
Fred?
And that's a tightrope, eh? You need to be very careful how you answer that. Otherwise, your goose might be cooked. But anyway, proceed.
First, before I come into that, I wanted to say something about this photo. And that's why I brought in the analogy of us having maybe some leaders within, and then we have a photo session. You know, from this side, we are used to be allowing the big boys to sit and stand behind. So maybe in the mindset of whoever took the photo or whoever shared the photo, thought that every Kenyan will imagine the way we are used to. That our president is seated and Biden is standing. So our president, the big man.
The question is, whose seat is that? But on the issue of the U.S. ambassador, Meg Whitman, we've seen the relationship that other governments, Kenyan governments, administrations have had with ambassadors from the same nation. And it's not been this cordial in a while, and probably that kind of influence, that kind of camaraderie is what has resulted. I'm sure it contributed greatly to this kind of state visit. Something has shifted. We remember back in the day, even during President Daniel Moi's, I'm not certain all of you were there back then, but there was an ambassador called Smith Hempston that was very critical of the administration, and subsequent ambassadors have also been very critical.
Even the UK ones.
Yes, but this time we're seeing a shift in that kind of politics, and that is what probably is ending up in such a state visit. Do you think that portends a risk for this country?
Not necessarily. As I said, US does not have friends. It only has it only moves to in accordance to its interests. And that's why I said we as a country, and we, because most of the times we represent the region because we have a fairly stable democracy, we should know when it is our time. You know, sometimes, Fred, it's not that people love you. It's just that sometimes an opportunity presents itself where your skills become important. But it's not to say that tomorrow skill set could change and people could move elsewhere. And part of my disappointment is that as Africans, we are yet to realize that where markets are going and shifting is to the African continent. And as a result, we need to negotiate with our so-called bigger brothers, knowing that we have leverage. But when sometimes you carry an entourage that does not understand market dynamics, then it becomes a problem for you. So sometimes when you carry, say, hangers on, and they go, one time I had a discussion with a prominent trade fellow in this country. And part of what came out is that sometimes when we send out delegations, we send the weakest delegations to go and negotiate on our behalf. So that when they get to those countries, they are more focused on selfies and buildings and parks and waterfalls, as opposed to what has taken them there. And you know, some of these trade negotiations, you saw even when we had UNCTAD here, it took like a week to negotiate on a single statement. So if you have weak negotiators, then things are going to pass you by. You look at China. Even to date, China has never accepted that they are a developed nation. Why? Because a developed nation comes with certain status that are not conducive to trade. So China has refused. They've said them, as far as World Trade Organization is concerned, they are not a developed nation, even though we know they are. Why? Because they have a projection and there's something they want to achieve. In the same manner, I believe that Africa needs to realize that it's not a Woishe movement. You know, it's not like Kitambo when we would go begging for arms, even though that's where as a country we are now because of the debts that we have borrowed. But we must realize that when we speak, we are now speaking of an East African market. It's not just the Kenyan market. When you look at what the African Union signed on ease of access to trade and goods, we are talking about an African market. So when one president goes to the US, he's not necessarily going on his own behalf. And that is why the front page of a Tanzanian newspaper is carrying the news of the Kenyan president in the US. Why? Because the statements he makes there are going to affect Tanzania in one way or another, because we trade with them, they are our sisters. So I believe that we have failed to notice the opportunities that lie before us. I have seen that the US has given us, say, $5.2 billion for democracy. What does that mean for us as a region? It tells you that people who work in the NGO sector now, it will be one of the best places now to go and work. Why? Because 5.2 billion will be coming, either in form of grants,
Are we going to see now the return of the NGOs to mainstream issues in Kenya? Because after a while, it would appear that most of them, through the programs that they were pursuing, had really moved out of the center of the conversation and moved probably to the periphery of the country.
You will see it. You will now see NGOs coming up. But I would also urge caution and treat them the way Kagame treated NGOs, where he said, 80% of your money must actually go towards the people, not 80% going to administration, and then a few photos in the 20% and reports is what is taken to the mother country. So I think that is important. But to your question on Meg Whitman, we used to have a diplomat called Edward Clay. You remember the famous vomiting in our shoes. And I think the Western diplomats are evolving. And they are evolving not because they love us, but because there is a dynamic shift. Now, Meg Whitman cannot afford to give us a dress down like that. Why? Because we could easily walk into BRICS. So now they must tone their language. We must develop some sort of camaraderie so that we lead them. When I say we, I take the stance of the diplomats, so that we lead the African states now into our basket. Because the way it's going now, if you look at West Africa, they've simply moved on from the West. France is now losing. And you see, that's a very big block. If you go to the Central African Republic, you can see Russians are getting in very strongly. If you look at a country like Djibouti and Eritrea, you have China that has come in strongly. China has set up a very strong base in Djibouti. So what is left now is East Africa. Now, if we do not understand that it is not that they love us, it's just that dynamics have changed, we will never negotiate with an equal hand.
Okay. And as we come to the end of this conversation, now the question on everyone's mind is, have we gotten value from this trip? Because the debate earlier this week was on the mode of transport that the president chose. He chose to charter, or rather to actually hire a private jet for this trip. And of course, with the hangers-on and his entourage, I'm sure there are other planes that were involved in this. And many people said that why should he get a luxury jet for such a trip at a time when the country is in dire straits? We are too much in debt. We are not able to finance our budget and all these things. Taxation is high. We are not even getting vaccines. So many problems back home, and then he gets this. But given the kind of headlines we're seeing and the kind of goodies that we've listed on the front pages. Do you think it was worth it?
I think, Fred, we have a lot of issues to do with the finance of this country. And we have many pending bills and many pending issues. You have the doctor strike just ended recently, and they just agreed they were not sorted. We have JSS, teachers are striking everywhere. It was not in good faith for the president to hire all that and carry all that entrance into the US. Because that one comes back to the taxpayer. It comes down to me, yourself, and my brother here. So I think in my own opinion, honest opinion, that was a miss. The president ought to have used alternative moves, which are there. They are available. Mm-hmm. If he had maybe an entourage of around 50 guys, not all the 50 used the private jet. Maybe 100, not all of them used the private jet. How did they reach the US? The president as well could have gone the same direction. We saw the president of Seychelles the other day using Kenya Airways, KQ, traveling around. What, did he die? Mm-hmm. He's still alive and he's still serving his people. So I think the president, in as much as he has managed to secure all that and confirmed the deals that have been there before, and these are likely to work out, it was not in good faith to spend all that to go with that jet. 70 million per hour, and also waiting fee, fueling, come back, and the entire entourage and everything. All this comes back to the taxpayer. And at the end of the day, it is us who are going to be forced to buy that bread at 70 shillings for us to get back this money where it came from. So it was in bad faith. And I think that's something that needs proper discussion, and it should not repeat itself. As the head of state, he should be the first person to say that we need to cut cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it value?
No, in Dimuli, sometimes it's bad to be in a poor country, or rather in a developing country. Because then it's like in the village, when you see your neighbor is progressing, you start imagining maybe they are stealing. Mm-hmm. You start imagining all manner of ill things. Instead, sometimes of just going and asking them, how do you do these things, I say that because even when we were growing up, when you hear that you're going somewhere on Sunday, we had something called Sunday best. Mm-hmm. You wear your best clothes, you wear your best materials, best shoe, because it's a Sunday and you're going out, even when you're going to meet visitors. I think it's the same thing for President William Ruto. I mean, it's the first state visit. You can't
show up looking shabby.
You can't show up to your benefactors. You can't go to receive 471 billion as a pauper. I mean, you must show some level of
value.
But even though, I'll tell you, organizing state visits is not a very easy thing, especially travel for the president and the delegation. They were visiting different states. And sometimes logistically, getting connecting flights and what have you becomes very difficult. So I think him using a private jet, it's just that we come from a country that's poor, or rather that's developing. But a private...
Are we really poor?
We are not.
Then if we are not poor, why are we complaining when our big man gets on a private jet? I mean, it's nothing. When you look at how much a US president spends just to move out of America to go into a country, it's huge. And that time, even when they are going into that country, they're actually taking aid. And of course, they will go back with several other things. So I think ours is a siege mentality and a poverty mindset that as a country we have adopted. Of course, it looks bad when you're hungry and you can see the big man is on a hustler jet. But I can tell you for a fact, the Fokker 70 that we have has only a range of 3,400.
It cannot cross the Atlantic.
It cannot cross the Atlantic. No, you want our president to lack fuel mid-air. So I think it's a discussion, it's a good discussion to have. It's only that I saw the government spokesman spoke to it in a manner that appeared to be condescending. But I think by and large, it was merited. In 2019, President Uhuru hired the same jet to go to Russia and to go to Japan. So I think what we need to do as a country, we need to develop to a level where we imagine such things are possible. Let's not just have this poverty mindset. When one of our brothers boards Kenya Airways first class, we think he's
and this is the head of state. This is the
we think he's a rich man.
Commander-in-chief. I mean, let us allow it to be.
Now, let's come back home now and away from the US. A lot has been happening in the US, and yes, we were, and ideally so, and probably rightly so, excited about what was happening in the US. But back home, a lot has happened as well over the past 1 week, especially as the president was away, in terms of politics, and that especially in the Mount Kenya region, a lot has happened. After the Limuru 3 that happened last week, we've seen what has happened with the deputy president, the differences that have appeared, and the kind of cracks that have appeared both within the UDA party, both within the government, and also in the Mount Kenya region. The discussion about resource allocation, division of resources, the 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote debate has also come back to the fore. Bona Ken Babu, what is your assessment of this? Is it the right time to have this discussion? Or do you see it through the lenses of this is just a simple haggling between siblings within the UDA party?
Fred, I think it is true that much has happened while the president was away. In fact, when the president gets back, somebody should give him a report, just like Kajwang the late once gave Raila a report, Baba, while you were away. Mm-hmm. So the president, while you were away, somebody said, kama mbaya ni mbaya. I think this discussion of 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote is, for us right now, is a non-starter. In fact, it's a discussion that should not be happening right now, as of now. We are not ready for it as a country. Because you cannot say that we are going to have 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. That's a populist idea. It is a populist idea that somebody is trying to use it just to gain popularity and look like is pushing for the interest of his region. But come to think of it, if you talk of 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote in the central, what happens in the northeastern? I was in the northeastern last week, and I can tell you for a fact that you can drive for about 30 kilometers without seeing even 30 guys. The maximum you can see is 5 or 10 people. So if you tell these guys that you want to do 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, then you are saying that their budget will be cut by almost half. Mm-hmm. Think of it. People in the central, for instance, Kiambu County, you'll find that in the tea factories, on the coffee factories in the Kiambu County, the majority of employees are people from Western. So when you are counting these guys and you're distributing resources in Kiambu County, for instance, 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote.
But most of them are voters in Kiambu.
It's okay. But what happens to where they came from?
Mm-hmm. But this is where they're residing now, even if they come from different areas of this country.
Look at Mandera, for instance, has a population of 806,000 roughly. And then Embu County, 608,000. If you do 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, who gets the majority? Mm-hmm. You will take more money to Mandera as opposed to Embu County, for instance. But look at the people, look at the voters, the service delivered that is needed. An MP in Garissa, for instance, let's say Garissa Township, gets 150 million from CDF, and an MP in Nairobi County gets 150 million for the same CDF. An MP in Nairobi has more than 40,000 people to deal with. Mm-hmm. But an MP in Garissa might not have even half of that now. Mm-hmm.
So are you supporting the 1 man?
What I'm saying is we should not have this discussion as of now. Because if we go that direction... Are you
saying it's irrelevant?
If we go that direction, we are going to be irrational, we are going to be, to be unfair to many people.
But is it an important discussion?
Is it time to have this discussion? Because as he talks about, it's an issue of time. He appears to agree that it's a discussion that we cannot avoid, but probably according to him, it's the time issue. Is it the right time to have this discussion?
I think it's never too late to discuss the right things. One of the things, I respect the deputy president a lot, but I think on this one, it's not that he erred by bringing it out. It's just that politically, I think he would have, so to speak, asked other people to speak about it. Why? because when the deputy president speaks about it, it is seen as a Mount Kenya issue. It is seen as a Kikuyu issue, Meru issue, the Rakanidi issue. It's not seen as a Kenyan issue. But what is the reality? The reality is 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling is a necessary framework. Why? Look at the 2 most populous counties in Kenya. One of them is Kiambu, the other one is Kakamega. Kakamega is not in Mount Kenya. When we say that money must follow the people, it would in essence mean that the people of Kakamega would benefit in as much as the people of Kiambu or Nairobi would actually get to benefit. So I think it's an important discussion fronted by the wrong person.
At the wrong time, huh?
No, the time is right. What I would have expected, politically, you can achieve many things depending on how you go about them. If I were deputy president, I would have called the MPs in Kakamega, and they are the ones who would have come up with the motion of 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. Then that way, people will listen. The people of Kakamega will say, actually, we are many. We are many. This discussion is important.
That declaration by the deputy president coming only a week to the Limuru 3 meeting, that also probably, it didn't work as they expected.
No, it might have spooked him. It might have spooked him. But I say, politics is the art of timing. When you want to advance an agenda for your people, you must be careful of the timing so that it's not seen. You see, the way we are discussing it now, we are discussing it as a deputy president issue, but the reality is that it is an issue that needs to be discussed by the country. And I'll tell you for a fact, Fred, if you ask me, look at the issue. There are 2 issues here. There is the issue of representation and there is the issue of money. And those 2 issues are different. The issue of representation, an MP in Ruiru has almost 200,000 voters. An MP in Garissa...
It's actually 800,000.
800,000. An MP in Garissa has maybe 20,000. So when you speak of representation, can we have a weighted representation so that in the House, in National Assembly, the MP of Ruiru has 3 votes, while the MP of Garissa has 1 vote. Now we sort out the issue of representation. It's just an idea. Secondly, now is the issue of resource allocation. Now remember, the more you are in a place, concentrated in a place, the more you exert in terms of resources. You need drainage, you need transport. And so to speak, you need a lot of money coming to you, not necessarily because your tax payment is commensurate to how many you are, but just by virtue of numbers, you need a lot of services. Then when we go to the issue of, so one is the issue of people, but secondly is the issue of marginalization. Yes, we agree you are not many, and we agree you've been lagging behind. Can we give you something that can bring you up to speed?
Hence the
so that
equitable
even
share.
the people, yes, so that even the people who are many can start now going to the areas that have been seen to be marginalized. And that's why I'm saying it's an important discussion.
There is an equalization fund for that.
Yeah, there's an equalization
which,
fund
by the way, hasn't worked for a majority of the counties. You saw some reports in some counties, what they have done. It has worked, yes, but you've seen much of it has been squandered. But the thing is, as a country, we need to have that discussion that 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, whichever form it takes, because it's not a must that it takes the form of, because I have 1 vote, I must get 1 shilling. But whichever form it takes, we must agree it is an important discussion in sharing of resources.
This debate has always suffered because of the person fronting it at whatever point.
Exactly.
When it was at the BBI level, it was opposed by the same people who are now proposing it. So the issue is, who is talking about it right now? Do you agree that probably since the deputy president is the one now saying he's going to be the biggest proponent of the debate, that is why it is getting such opposition?
Fred, I think you will all agree with me that this issue, as it's coming right now, it's a political tool. The problem, just as you mentioned, the problem is at what point are we bringing up an issue? The deputy president did not come to this country yesterday. He's been here all this time. Why is it that at the point that a conversation started coming up that there is some strangled in the government, there's some misunderstanding between the deputy president and the president, and then now erupts with 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote. And then he goes back and starts this discussion back in his backyard. Just as you mentioned, this country, we have an issue with who is proposing something. It might be a good idea, but the proposer, we have a problem with the proposer. Get that? Issue of the equalization fund. It's a very serious concern. And that this is part of the discussion we should be having. How are we using these funds? These are funds that is placed there to put the counties or the areas that have been lagging behind to come into the stability of the others. But when this money is released, it is our leaders, number one, who misappropriate these funds. To an extent that a county somewhere, for instance, in Mandera, that only has 23 kilometers tarmac road since independence. They cannot, the leaders in that region cannot appropriate this equalization fund, I mean, in a very fair way, in an honest way, to ensure that that county is growing. Fred, we need, from where I sit, we still need to maintain the third formula share and do away with this 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote or something. Because if you go that direction, and I want to tell you, my brother Eric, if you go that direction, 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, there are counties, there are regions in this country.
But is it possible that one formula could actually work out all these issues? It would appear that probably a raft of different formulas put together and an aggregation of some sort
definitely
a better solution.
Exactly. There is need to put in together these ideas so that we can come up with something concrete that will sort out A, B, C, and D. But if Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is pushing 1 man, 1 vote, and people from Mount Kenya, people from the other regions, for instance, people from the northern side cannot buy that idea.
Okay. They
cannot buy that idea. And we were having a discussion last night, and a group of young men and young ladies from the northern, they were saying, since independence, we've been lagging behind. If not for the evolution, you could have not even seen a tarmac road in the northern side. If not for the evolution, maybe some of us could have not even be able to see, a level 5 hospital or level 2. If not for the evolution, some of us, we could have not even seen electricity. So when you talk of 1 man, 1 shilling, 1 vote, then you are trying to say that northeastern side of this country is not part of Kenya. They should be kept aside because they don't have numbers, and the shares now should be taken to people with the numbers.
Now, do you think the entry of the Deputy President into this debate will have a negative effect on this debate?
It's already having
probably, if at all it was discussed purely at Limuru 3 and other areas, it would have had a longer lifespan. But since the entry of this voice into that debate, that will change.
You know, politicians do things for different reasons. Someone could come up with something to spite another person. You know, I could be on this show, but you ask me a question.
Do you think that is what is happening? Whoever is proposing it is not as genuine?
And I address a different, you know, when I speak to this camera, I could be targeting my message to completely different people. There is a person I want to hear this message specifically, but it's not necessarily that I want to implement what I have been saying. The history of 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling is one that was started with BBI. And I can tell you where we are when we started with Majimboism, then we came to devolution. It was simply an issue of devolving money and services, you know, from the national to, and the debate on 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling is a further discussion to that on how Fred will benefit courtesy of living in Vihiga or courtesy of living in Mandela or wherever he lives. How will he benefit from government services? How can we bring money closer to him? So I think it's the second tier of the discussion. Now, we might not achieve it now, but it is important that we sustain the discussion to the foreseeable future because, as I said, politics is a matter of timing. It will come a time when, who would have thought that the President Uhuru Kenyatta would get into a handshake with Raila? And they saw an opportunity to sneak in BBI. Unfortunately for them, they were not able to communicate effectively as to what BBI was all about because then it was seen as a Kikuyu issue because of Uhuru Kenyatta. And so the other regions made sure that they rallied so that we could defeat it, including ourselves in Mount Kenya. We made sure that we defeated it. But we did not defeat it during Uhuru's time because we don't like Uhuru. We defeated it because he tagged along someone whom we thought we did not like. You see why timing in politics is important. But the good thing is the discussion has refused to die. And therefore, what will happen is that it will keep metamorphosizing. We will get better ideas with time. And I can assure you, Fred, because we are in this country together, if taxes do not finish us, one day we will be together to implement 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling. And it is not 1 shilling, 1 vote. It is 1 vote, 1 shilling. Yes.
Okay. Now that the president has ended his trip to the US officially after that dinner last night, he's coming back home. And as we make our final comments, as you said, Baba, while you were away, a lot of things did happen. There's the issue of the finance bill that has generated a lot of concern. And now with the divisions that this debate about the 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling has created, there has been murmurs and people are saying even within the Mount Kenya region that we are going to bring down this, we're going to vote against this finance bill. Do you expect the president to come and be able to firefight this in the few days remaining before this bill is actually debated in the House of Parliament? And do you think that this debate that has been happening here in the absence of the president will actually be consequential in as far as bringing down the finance bill?
You know, one thing that comes out clear in terms of when it comes to political structure of this country is that we've never had honest leaders. I think maybe our lot might be the first lot of honest leaders, but we've never had honest leaders. Because people will talk when the person they're talking about is not there. But when the guy steps in, nobody is willing to come up and say that we don't like this thing. Those people who have been talking about the finance bill, shutting down finance bill or everything, the day the president will land in this country and someone's for a PG, parliamentary group meeting, nobody will talk. None of them will talk.
Will that be the end of the divisions we are seeing right now?
Possibly. Because the moment the president arrives and calls for a meeting, say that, okay, guys, we need to pass this thing. None of those guys will talk. That's the challenge we are having. We don't have revolutionists. We just have people who, when the master is not in, they shout. When the guy comes in, everybody keeps quiet. Now, the issue of finance, it's very sad. And Fred, it is so sad that we are having these issues of taxes and everything, but we've not had a proper public participation to get what the people are feeling on the ground. We just had people, I mean, the normal Mwananchi is just hearing about these things on TV. As you're talking right now, people in Kisumu West are just hearing about finance bill because I'm here and I'm talking about it. But there has not been a proper conversation with the people in Kisumu and say, this is the finance bill and this is what he's talking about and this is how the tax will be put in and this will be the cost of the bread. Okay. That Mama Mboka in the village does not know about that. I think what we need to do, we need to create time, whatever time it is, so that every individual in this country can get an opportunity to synthesize and understand what this document talks about. Okay. In fact, it should be even written in mother tongue, in the native language, so that the people in the village can also get an opportunity to read through and say, if these taxes go through, bread will be this cost. If you have a car, Fred, and
you will have to pay this much.
And the Kuria Kimani, Mheshimiwa Fomolo said, if you cannot manage to pay that money, leave that guy at home. Okay. That. These are conversations that need to be taken down to the village, so that old woman, where Eric comes from, can understand in her native language that indeed my son Eric will not be able to drive a car in Nairobi because he cannot pay 5,000 shillings.
Eric, a final comment. The president last time managed to marshal the entire Kenya Kwanza MP force to vote for the Finance Bill 2023 without changing anything, or minimal changes, if any. This time round, we are seeing the possibility of some cracks and probably an extension from the cracks we're seeing right now. Do you think it will sustain to the time when this bill will actually be up for debate?
I think what is substantive in the bill might remain, but what might vary is tax to tax, the implement. Remember, even in 2023, there were variations on the housing levy, what initially had been proposed after outcry. It still passed, but there were variations. And my concern is with the motor vehicle assessment tax. And my proposal would be, you know, when you look at the way it is structured, I agree that government must collect money. The truth is, Fred, right now, the government has no money, and we have a lot of debt that we need to pay, and we can only pay that through taxes. But in the way the tax regime is structured, especially for the motor vehicles, I believe they could have done better. I would rather, for instance, they increase the taxes in the fuel than collect a lump sum every year of, say, Kenya shillings 30,000. Why? If I consume, like for instance, I consume 4 liters per day myself, depending on the vehicle that I have. When you look at 7 days, that's 28 liters in a week. When you look at 52 weeks, that would be 1,400 and something liters per year. If I multiply, say that by 20, I'll still achieve the same figure, but I'll not be coerced. And remember, we have consumed fuel in this country when it was 220, and there was still traffic jam. So instead of putting a lump sum that because Fred has a car, he must provide 20,000 shillings now. If it is a must that we have that tax, we could find a way of reintroducing it in the fuel, so that it becomes a bit easier for you to pay.
I get you. The issue is now, do you think these divisions that we're now seeing among Kenya Kwanza MPs could actually provide a better platform for proper scrutiny or better scrutiny of the Finance Bill 2024 in comparison to what happened last year?
I think yes and no. What will happen, in my opinion, is that the MPs might not pass it as it is now because cracks are already emerging. But when the president communicates the need for the amount that needs to be raised, they will find a way to lessen the burden on the taxpayer, but even though they will maintain the same structure. That is why I'm saying for some of those taxes, we could look at how the variation could be done so that even when it is passed, it sort of eases you on your pocket. Most of Kenyans right now, they have third-party insurance. Even that third party, there are people who pay in 2 months or 3 months. In installments. So when you tell the insurance to collect 30,000 on their behalf, I mean, I agree with Kuri, I am better off leaving the car at home.
Asante Sana, Eric Mungai, political analyst, and Ken Babu, Youth League Chairman, Democratic Action Party Kenya, DAP Kenya, for your very well-considered opinions on the matters we've been discussing. Key among them, the president's visit to the U.S. and the goodies is coming back with, and what that means for us, as well as politics that has been playing out locally. To editorial comment now. It has been a rather busy news week. What with the president away in the U.S. on a state visit, and local politics back home almost reaching fever pitch. In this muddle, we may have overlooked a critical failure by the Ministry of Health, one that could mean the difference between life and death. In our obsession with politics, we turned a blind eye to a crisis that has been growing within the health sector, an acute shortage of crucial vaccines. Now, in a letter dated May 16, addressed to Health Cabinet Secretary Susan Nakhumicha, the Council of Governors raised the alarm over stockouts of essential vaccines. These vaccines are crucial in preventing a high number of common diseases that mainly affect infants, thereby reducing mortality rates. The lack of essential vaccines such as BCG, DTP, rotavirus, and others means that hundreds of thousands of Kenyan children are missing critical life-saving immunizations. This is an unacceptable failure in a country with high rates of tuberculosis, polio, and other infectious diseases. The shortage apparently has been caused by continuous significant cuts in the Ministry of Health's budget, which received only 1.2 billion shillings for vaccine procurement last year, down from the annual allocation of 2.6 billion, slashed by almost half. In a matter of weeks, the current stock will have reached a critical low, with a nationwide stockout only months away. At a time when Kenyans are being forced to